Let's recap what we've gotten so far in the portal. So I'm not gonna. The name is gonna destroy me. Nate Borkircher. We'll go with Borkircher. Blocking tight end, added from Nebraska. 6th year of college football. An experienced guy who graded really well is a blocking tight end. And you also added another blocking tight end, Micah Riley. But we've talked about how Micah Riley actually, in my opinion, has some pass catching upside because of his high school tape. He was a strong pass catcher in high school. He just happened to be behind 2 senior veterans at Auburn. Who knows what Micah Riley can develop into? But continuing with the theme of adding offensive players, you added the big ones, Mario Craver, Micah Hudson. Obviously, Hudson was a primetime target from day one, someone that every Aggie wanted. Mario Craver kind of became that once the options available kind of shaved down. And I think Mario Craver is another great young guy to add to your room. You're set with a very promising but young wide receiver room, the only upperclassman in that room now that Bostic transferred out. All your graduates, everyone going pro, and Cyrus Allen transferring. It's Noah Thomas as your upperclassman, and then a bunch of young guys, sophomores and freshmen, some very promising, but it is a young room. And then Jacob Zeno, we've talked about it. I would say that if you're building around Marcel Reed, Jacob Zeno was the perfect quarterback to add to the room. He was a veteran that was willing to come in and play behind a young Marcel Reed, be one play away from being the guy at A&M when you don't really have a clear pro path. If you're Zeno, you've played for UAB, you haven't been on the big stage. Now he has a chance to back up, play potentially garbage time, but honestly, just waiting in case something happens as an insurance policy is Jacob Zeno. I think that's probably the best he could do, the highest he could achieve at this point in his career. And you add, I think he's like a 7th or 8th year senior, so you add a ton of experience to the room. And then the lone defensive player you've added is Julian Humphrey, a veteran corner, played a lot of football at Georgia, but has definitely taken his fair share of lumps as a starter. But he comes to A&M more of a rotational piece because I don't know about you guys, I am pretty happy with Des Ricks and Will Lee at the corner starters. And with Julian Humphrey kind of, projecting to be a rotational guy, a sub guy, a guy injuries, maybe play some nickel, who knows what they'll do with him, as kind of a guy they can plug where as needed, I think that's a really good floor raiser. And I think him and Javen Thomas both represent that kind of immediate floor to your corner room. If something happens, you need to give someone a spell. I think it's a really, really good addition. But I see questions about the tight end room. I want to get into it. So here's the question. Do we need to add one more? You've added 2 blocking tight ends. You lose Watson. You lose Calhoun. Those were 2 of your 3 mainstays at tight end this year. You bring back Theo Mellon-Nordstrom with experience from the previous year. And obviously you have Miller. I think he's a Purdue transfer. Didn't play this year due to injury. And Donovan Green. And then you obviously have Keody Armstrong, the freshman jump ball phenom coming out of high school. Who knows if he can play early? But right now, unless you're banking on a huge jump from Theo Mellon-Nordstrom, which I think he has in the chamber, I think Theo showed some promising stuff on the season, I still think you want to add one pass-catching tight end to this room. I think the experience you lose 2 mainstays, a lot of uncertainty around Donovan Green. And look, I mean, I know we're all rooting for Donovan. I know we like Donovan a lot, but there's no guarantees there, man. If we were to somehow get freshman Donovan Green back with a little bit more mental maturity added to that, being that he'll be an older man now, that would be huge for the team. But to bank on that in an offseason, I don't know. And I don't know if they get Claire, the high-profile tight end out of Purdue. I don't think that battle's done yet. I think there's still a chance there. Of course, I have to reiterate, I'm not an insider. I just reflect on what we're being told and what has happened. Look to your insiders for all that up-to-date stuff. I would argue that there's still room for one more tight end to add here. Calhoun and Watson will be out. It sounds like they'll be playing in the bowl game, I would think. Platt obviously going to Arkansas now. Don't like that, but good luck to you, sir. And you have Garrett Miller in the room. You do get Carner. He was a recruit last year. I think, what do they call it, gray-shirted. He'll be on the team this year. I think you need a ready-made tight end. One more pass-catching specialist. I think if you're kind of saying, okay, we have Theo, we added a couple of blockers in the portal this year, and then you're going to rely on Green and Keody Armstrong, I think that's taking a big risk in a system that likes to use 3 tight ends a game. I'm saying you add one more in the portal. Let's go to the receiver. And hopefully it's Max Clare. That would just be fantastic. And, speaking of Purdue transfers, just real quick, Dabo, what the hell are you doing? I thought you didn't believe in the portal. Why you went on one-on-ones with us Why you getting the defensive end out of Purdue in a head-to-head battle versus A&M? Dabo, stop. Stop doing the portal thing. We don't like it. It would have been cool if you weren't, going at our guys, but DaVon Sweeney, I forget his name, but he won the edge rusher out of Purdue in a head-to-head recruiting battle versus A&M today. Unfortunate, Dabo has arrived, apparently. Real quick on the receiver room, and then we'll get into defensive needs, of which are plenty. Micah Hudson. Are we banking on Micah Hudson as a day one impact guy? I think that's the hope. I think there's a chance that happens, but you have to keep in mind Micah Hudson is coming off of an injury that set him behind the 8 ball in the rotation at Texas Tech. There's no guarantee he's a ready-made starter day one. I think it's a great project. It's a great ceiling elevator to the room, and hell, he could be the MVP next year. He has that in his capabilities. That's in the realm of possibilities. But to bank on that, I don't think so. As we're sitting right now, KC Concepcion is still on the table. A couple of Bama guys have come on the table. I think there's probably some guys we haven't heard about who are on the table right now. Obviously, KC Concepcion, he's kind of in that slot build. I think he's 5'10", but he does a lot on the football field. I think he's a guy you're still very happy to add despite, the pieces you've already added. I think you take what you can get. If you can get an experienced day one type of starter, a floor raiser, that'll make you feel real good. And we've heard Colin Klein talk about how he likes to use 6 or 7 receivers. Right now, let's count them out. Noah, let's just throw Bussy in there. Craver, let's throw a Hudson in there. Ashton Bethel Roman, maybe? How y'all feel about that? And then one more guy from the field. But who knows if an Isaiah Williams can step up, if a Ernest Campbell can find a way. You have some young guys there as well. Oh, and of course, Jerome Miles, another guy like Hudson coming off of injury, significant ACL injury in high school, hasn't played much his last 2 years of high school, but obviously has all the tools you could ever hope for. Him and Hudson are kind of in that same boat to where there is a possibility they're day one impact guys, but there's also a route where it's a longer burn and maybe they're more mid-season impact guys or even not freshman impact guys. Let's get to some areas where you need to do a lot of work. And we all know that's the D-line. So as of right now, I would like to hear from you guys. I personally feel like we have a decent starting four next year. I mean, a good starting four. I think it has a high ceiling with a guy like DJ Hicks and Cassius Howell, both of which could be breakout players next year. And then obviously senior leader Albert Regis will be huge. And then if you run with those two, are you comfortable putting Rylan Kennedy as your starter at the other defensive end? Because you'd be going with double-edged starters there. I think some teams do it. Some teams go light there. I think the evidence with Elko would show that he likes to have a true strong side defensive end. And that's priority one in the portal for me right now. You need to get a legit run-stopping, sturdy defensive end. You need at least one next year. You have some young guys that project as that. We'll talk about them in just a second. But I think you need a ready-made defensive end and probably a ready-made edge rusher. Now, beyond that, you're going to need a couple defensive tackles to back up Hicks and Regis. Let's look at the team right now. And keep in mind, this is going to have some guys that are still on the team on the list. So, yeah, we talked about Regis, Howell, Hicks, and Kennedy. That projects as your bowl game starters. That projects as your starters next year. Solomon Williams and Kendall Jackson are two guys that could potentially enter the rotation as defensive ends next year. I think they showed some decent stuff in the spring game, obviously solid high school tapes, but they're very young, and we're going to really see them for the first time in the bowl game. So this will be a very high priority for watching and trying to project next year's team. Check out Solomon Williams, check out Kendall Jackson, number 30 and number 42, respectively. Strong side guys. Solomon Williams is 250 pounds. Kendall Jackson is 265. That's what you need at that strong side defensive end. You need big, sturdy guys. And I'm not asking for a Nick Scorton right here. I'm not asking for a DeMarvin Leal. We don't need a 290-pounder necessarily. We don't have that. If you can add one in the portal, great. But I just need a little bit more girth out there, a little bit more sturdiness out there. I think these guys have that upside. Interior-wise, you're needed. I think the perfect model for what this team needs to add is Rodas Johnson. I think if you could add a Rodas Johnson or two, a couple Johnsons to this team, I think you'd be feeling really, really good about your situation there because you have your starters, but you got to be 4 deep at defensive line. And then maybe Dalen Evans, high-profile guy coming in injured, maybe he can step up and find a place in the rotation next year. I would argue he's a little bit undersized to play defensive tackle, but a year in the weight room, year plus in the weight room, he could be there. And then we've talked about how the incoming freshman class, I think some of those guys have a chance to play early. So if you could add at least one defensive tackle, but probably two, with experience, not necessarily high-profile experience, but with some games played, with some productivity, like a Rodas Johnson, you're good there. So we're looking at 2 D tackles, strong side end, and then one more defensive end. So I'm looking at bare minimum 4 defensive linemen to be added to this team. Beyond that, I'm good with whatever this team does. I think if you hit your needs, you have enough talent, even in the corner room, even in the safety room. I think there's enough bodies there to have a great competition to see if some improvement next year. I feel really, really good about the linebacker core. Not only the guys production-wise you have returning, but I feel really good about Jernigan and Lockhart as your linebackers of the future. Really, really good about those guys. You have Noah Mikael, who, he's also great for our future. I feel so good about that linebacker room. I know I'm in the minority there. I know a lot of Aggies are asking for a linebacker, and I think there's an argument to be made that you add a senior guy with experience who wants to get into the rotation. I think that's fine to add. But as far as finding a bunch of bodies out of this linebacker room, I think you're good. I think you did your work at corner. I think if Tyreek Chappelle comes back, you feel good at nickel. You have Bravion Rogers, going to be a junior this year. In safety, man, you can add one. You can add one to push the room. But again, personnel-wise, I really like Dalton Brooks. Bryce Anderson will be back. Marcus Radcliffe will be back. You still have Jared Kerr on the team. I don't know what happened to him this year. I think you have some young freshmen coming up. Miles Davis really showed out whenever he had an opportunity. I still feel good in the safety room, but like linebacker, if you want to add one to the room, I would put safety probably a tick above linebacker in the priority room. Now, here's one that I get all the time. I hear a lot of Aggies asking for a bruising running back. In case something happens to Le'Veon Moss, your down-to-down guy, you need another big guy to add to that room. I think it's okay to do that. I don't think you need to. I think you added 2 freshman running backs. I think freshman running backs can play, especially when you have 3 at the top in the room, the stable that we knew of this year, hopefully healthy next year, with Ruben Owens back and Amari Daniels back. I feel good about that trio, and I feel good about your depth of 2 freshmen. Now, if you wanted to add one guy, again, like safety, more like linebacker, because I think safety there's more of an argument to add there, I think you can add one. But it does not sound like it's a priority of this team. So what did I miss? Did I hit everything? I think O-line is set. I think Trey Zune sounds like he'll probably be back next year. We need to get the official announcement. I think Albert Regis will be back next year. We probably need to hear an official announcement just because they are draft eligible. There is a path for guys like that. I would really think Regis is back. Le'Veon Moss, I think he'll be back next year. Where are you guys at? Let's check. Yeah, DJ Sanders. I think DJ Sanders, redshirt sophomore in the house. Yeah, I think DJ Sanders has a path to play. I think any of those freshman defensive tackles you added, they have a chance to crack the rotation. I don't think you would want to rely on them as starters or as getting any kind of majority of reps, but I would feel pretty decent about them cracking the tail end of that rotation. Yeah, you have DJ Sanders, early playing time potential, but then the underrated Chase Sims, who surged in the recruiting rankings late. I think he has a potential path to crack rotation stuff early, and we even heard Coach Bateman say that he thinks Landon Brink can be an early playing time guy. So, again, if you have to play these freshmen at the tail end of the rotation, I think you're okay there. I don't think it's the end of the world playing freshmen in that capacity.